right. So yeah, so the seminar will be about applying the new digital tools for AI-oriented research based on practical examples from breast radiology. And I'm a radiologist at the breast radiology unit at the Karolinska University Hospital. And I also share my time between that and AI research in the same area than breast imaging. And so far it's focused on screening. And as you probably know, screening mammography is one of the best interventions to reduce mortality from cancer. And it has been estimated that the risk of dying within 10 years of a breast cancer diagnosis is up to 40% lower for women that participate in screening compared to those who don't participate. So it's a great thing. However, it's also something where AI can possibly be of use, since there is a lot of healthy mammograms that needs to be assessed by radiologists, and there is a big shortage of breast radiologists. So there is something that there's an opportunity for AI to contribute there by reducing the workload. If AI could replace or somehow make the work more efficient, replace a radiologist. Also, I can say that even though the mortality is reduced so much, there is still 30% of the cancers in screened women are not screen detected. I think it would be good if everybody can mute if you're not talking, because there's some disturbance. So what we did last year is that we compared 3 commercial available AI algorithms in a large database that we have collected. And it was quite interesting. So one of the AI algorithms was much better than the other 2. So this is an AUC curve. Maybe, I don't know if it says a whole lot or not to you, but it's the algorithm 1 that is the darker curve that is like going higher up to the left, upper left corner of the diagram. That is the best one. It has the higher AUC, a better it better can predict if there is cancer or not in the mammogram than the other 2. So that's what we did. And we also compared to the radiologist, and when it comes to sensitivity, to find out how much cancer can the radiologist detect and how much cancer can the AI detect. So the radiologist detected between 77 and 80% of cases that actually were diagnosed with cancer within 1 year from the screening. And the first AI was at least as good, and the other 2 were worse. So a big difference here between the different AI algorithms. Then we also found out that, I mean, if you compare reader 1, a radiologist, with AI 1, we got a even higher sensitivity. So almost 89% of the cancer was then detected, but AI and radiologists make different mistakes. So we would need to discuss much more cases. So even if we would save 1 radiologist, replace it with AI, it means that more cases will be assessed as abnormal. So more cases must be discussed. So, but still, I think we would use the workload on the balance. Anyway, so this is kind of an introduction, because to do this kind of research requires a good database, and to do it, make it even better, you need also a database that is available for radiologists to kind of enhance the data by annotations. So I did this final image here, where we start with, we have to collect images, radiologist assessments, collect clinical and registry data to know who were diagnosed with breast cancer, and put all these data together, linked and curated data, so that it is kind of a clean database. And then we need to enhance the data with radiologist annotations, because in normal clinical image, we don't mark up where the tumor is located, but to be more efficient in training AI need to know where is the tumor. So it needs, I mean, it's more efficient, less noise. So that's necessary. And on the other hand, we can also then see, we can use this kind of data to develop AI algorithms, to fine-tune existing AI algorithms, and to also just test and evaluate existing AI algorithms as we did in our study. And then we can also bring it together and see what would happen if radiologists would interact with AI and use either just replace a radiologist with AI or somehow make the radiologist utilize the information that comes out of the AI. So all these kind of activities must be tied together somehow, and then we just worked with one hospital. We have several hospitals. We have three or four more in the Stockholm region. But if you want to go further outside to include more and more hospitals, you really need some kind of infrastructure pulling all this together, enabling multiple hospitals, enabling radiologist annotations. Maybe the radiologist not located in your own hospital where the data is, and also make it possible to run different AI algorithms on the same data. And then we need to think about privacy and personal integrity to preserve and maintain that. The data processing must be efficient. It doesn't work with downloading images through too slow, narrow bandwidth connections and so on. And the aim would be to enhance the quality of care also across regions, since software is much easier to distribute than actual radiologists. And then we should establish sustainable solutions from a legal and technical perspective so that we don't have to come up with new agreements, new technical solutions every year. So this is some kind of image of the need from a research perspective. And I'm not sure exactly how it will tie into Anders' presentation, but I'm sure there are many points that can be covered. And by that, I think I will just hand over the word to Anders Nordell, who's the CEO of the Collective Minds Radiology.
Thank you, Fredrik. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay, super. So, as Fredrik said, my name is Anders Nordell. I will just give a brief introduction to myself. I went to school at the Royal Institute of Technology here in Stockholm. Started my career in medical imaging at Karolinska. So I worked at the children's department, neuroradiology department, neuroscience, and general radiology. Went to Stanford for a little bit more than a year, came back to Sweden and started working commercially within the medical imaging field, then as an MRI expert. Spent 10 years at GE Healthcare, working, selling imaging equipment to Northern Europe and running the product teams for that region. Maybe developing my skill set, becoming more and more generalized, but really focused on healthcare, industry, academia, collaborations, and how to create win-win, what is needed for this to work well. So one of my core interests. Started or is one of the co-founders of Collective Minds back in 2017, and since then all in on this new venture. So that's the background on me, and I think my presentation will tie in nicely to Fredrik, maybe a little bit more general, not so specific on Mammo, but some examples on Mammo. So please interrupt me if you have any questions along the way. So I thought we would start here. Let's see if I can get some faces there as well. Okay, super. So Collective Minds Radiology, we position ourselves as a healthcare collaboration company, which is a broad term. We can narrow it down to the community we are serving right now, which is mainly radiology or medical imaging. And the services we offer are within professional consultation, so experts advising other experts, research topics such as clinical trials, both academic and sponsored ones. And then lastly, and the important piece for us as well, is medical education. So those are the services we provide today. And really what we build is what we call a new workspace, and this is maybe where the digital tools come in. So we have created this professional collaboration platform, which we call Collective Minds, and it's both to connect global medical expertise, but also new digital tools. The idea is that it can enable work, more freely and when time fits. And one of the maybe most important things to get this working inside healthcare and in the space that Fredrik introduced is patient privacy by design, and protecting the rights of the patient while still enabling to work together to drive this field forward. So practically, this means a cloud space which is built up by a web front, a mobile, and professional medical imaging tools, one can say. So right now for the radiology community, we are serving we have these services inside consultation, which is really about collaboration on patient cases, expert to expert or radiologist to radiologist, but also to get some early access to AI tools. Education is pretty straightforward. So basically, a really important integrated part of healthcare is continuous education. And here we provide a virtual interactive radiology training tool where teachers can connect with their pupils and run training sessions. And then into research, which will be the main topic for today, really about running clinical trials, sharing data, collaborating on this data, curating the data, doing analysis on the data, both for the academic segment, but also for professional use, such as the pharmaceutical industry, developing drugs, or the biotech industry, creating new biomarkers, or healthcare, creating new or deciding on new methods. So where are we today? So we have caught quite a lot of interest across Europe. So we are at Collective Minds today, 25 people working with this. Half the team is in Barcelona working on the product engineering, and half the team is in Täby, right north of Stockholm. And one of the metrics we use to measure interest is the amount of radiologists using our service. And we set a pretty aggressive plan, which said 3,000 radiologists before the end of the year 2021. That was like our primary goal when a few years back. And right now we are onboarding about 50 radiologists per week, and using Collective Minds for one of the services I mentioned previously. So we are very, very happy about that interest, and now really trying to develop tools that make sense for our community. So moving into the research repository now, and a little bit more the topics that Fredrik mentioned. So basically, the concepts here, and I will show a few demonstrations of the different pieces of the software a little bit later. But basically, it's all about data and image management. So being able to create and structure a multimodality or multimodal data repository, integrate visualization tools so we can actually look at this data. Put in regulatory things that is very developed, for example, in the pharmaceutical industry, relating to electronic signatures when we sign off on data, having a really good audit track so we know what is happening to our data, etc., etc. And then maybe the most important piece where we spend most of the time is to have enable collaboration with partners, whether they are inside the hospital for another purpose than the clinical one, or if they are national partners working together on a mutual project, or if they're international parties. And I think, Fredrik, you can agree that as the field progresses, the need to have larger cohorts of data across multiple modalities becomes more and more important, especially in the field of AI.
Absolutely, yeah.
So and then once we have collected data, or we are in the process of collecting data, they can come from different vendors, from different healthcare systems. Maybe they were not acquired in using the exact same protocol. Maybe there are other differences in the data sets, clinical or technical, and so there's always a need for harmonization. And I think historically this harmonization and curation of data has happened locally at different centers, which makes it also hard to combine them and to make a bigger cohort. So we also propose like a curation pipeline to go along with actual repository of data, and then in this making this analysis, as the data sets grow bigger, it is very time consuming to do manual curation. So the ability to use automatic tools to curate data or to enhance data is also really hot topic in the field right now. And many of these projects that we are involved with today, they involve validation work, comparing maybe the performance of an AI engine to the gold standard of a panel of radiologists, for example. So the ability to run automated imaging biomarkers on these data sets is very, very important. And then to create trust in these new tools that sit now in the cloud. Regulatory and compliance is extremely important, and so first of all, we have chosen to follow the medical device regulations, which ends up in a CE marked product, ready for basically for clinical use. To follow and be kind of advocates of GDPR, which is the basically the foundation of this new type of collaborations. So GDPR is extremely important. Trying to merge what the pharmaceutical industry did for a long time, working with concepts like good clinical practice or good laboratory practice, and building frameworks like the GAMP5 framework, which kind of explains how we can achieve good clinical practice in a study, which can be cumbersome and a lot of work, so not so adopted maybe on the academic side, but still have some really good points when we start to speak about large data sets. Just so you get an idea how a project at Collective Minds can work. So basically, we have connected hospitals to our system. And at the hospital, there is a clinical archive or there is a research archive. So we have research data. Before this data leaves the data controller, which is the connected hospitals, we need to minimize this data or de-identify in layman's language. So basically remove any identifiers of who this person is. We according to the GDPR, whenever we have a data controller, we should be able to trace the data. So we do something called pseudonymization, which I come back to in a little while, making the data traceable for the data controller, but de-identified for anyone else. Then the data flow is into Collective Minds Cloud, where we have a study and result storage for our repository of structured data. Inside the repository, we can then raise these project pipelines or research project pipelines, which are fully customizable. So each repository can hold many of these with different purposes. So this is just an idea how to understand it. So we raise a cohort of the repository into a project. We do some data quality control on this. Maybe there is a radiological review made by panel of radiologists. We have some specific analysis to do. It could be some kind of comparison. It could be running an AI software on the data, or even make some kind of local processing from someone. Once we have gone through this, maybe we want to approve the results or control the results if we are a principal investigator, and then we store the results in a database. In these specific examples, we see that we have maybe radiographers, scientists, radiologists, or healthcare staff, researchers, all working together. So it's a collaborative effort to move the data through this pipeline, and for them to know what they do when the data is ready for me to work on it, etc. We have built this kind of notification service, so we all the time can know when my task is ready to be done. So think of it as a combination of really a structured image management system or research system, and your kind of community of researchers. Okay, so let's spend some time on data privacy. So the way GDPR defines this, I think this is important to regardless if you work with Collective Minds or elsewhere. So basically, GDPR always wants to have a data controller, and what GDPR set out to do initially was really to, when we do processing on data, we want this to be more specific and better explained. So the data controller can do quite a lot inside GDPR, as long as they stay inside GDPR, follow the regulations of GDPR, and follow this process. So for us, this process means that each data controller, they sign a data processing agreement, or they agree on a data processing agreement with us, whom then are the data processor to the data controller. in this processing agreement, there is something called instructions for processing. In these instructions, we detail the purpose for processing, how we will process the data, and how we will also protect the data. So think about GDPR as a, trying to structure this process. So rather than saying that everything needs to be anonymous when we share data, it says that, okay, the purpose of processing needs to be, and the risk of a data privacy breach needs to be in balance. You cannot process any data the purpose for processing is don't need, and as long as you follow these rules, GDPR is a really good framework. So basically, the connected clinics sign this data processing agreement with us, and we become the data processor to the data controller. For anyone that will collaborate on the data controller's data, we have something called access controlled users, and they sign a user privacy policy, as you've seen in many internet services, and you're all very used to accepting these. The additional that applies for healthcare is that for this processing to happen on healthcare data, which we are talking about now, the users needs to be healthcare professionals or experts, as they're called in GDPR, and work under secrecy. So very similar to how it would work at the hospital. So we, as a data processor, needs to ensure this. And then we want to work also with maybe third-party AI partners or AI providers, and this works really nicely in GDPR as well, as there's a concept called sub-processors. So any sub-processor, we can have a contract with them as long as it's part of the processing agreement towards the data controller. Does this make sense so far? Any questions? Okay, so I'll continue. So basically, this is the same picture of what I just said, with hospitals here working together, their teams being defined as access control repository users, and on the analysis validation side, if we want to do processing outside the main repository, they become sub-processors. Okay, so how can we achieve this minimization of data initially, and to fulfill what GDPR says? So basically, on the left side of this dashed line, we have the local institution, where you have an archive, often a clinical archive, where there is clear identifiers of patients. Once you move it into the research repository, you want this data to be minimized, or no direct identifier to the patient. Okay, so in order to achieve this, what we do is that we install a small stateless server at the hospital, which is basically an operand. So it doesn't hold any data, but it has a few intelligent features. So basically, when you send data to Collective Minds, you send it locally to this what we call the proxy. Data arrives with visible patient IDs. There is a minimization step, removing all direct identifiers to the patient. Each hospital or each data controller holds what we call a hash secret, which is a secret only the controller has, and the patient identifier is then run through a hash function and together with a hash secret, and at the other end you have a hash key which is unidirectional. So once the data arrives at your research repository, they are basically de-identified for everyone except for the data controller. The reason we make this traceable is that the data controller, according to GDPR, needs to offer the right to the physical person to be forgotten. So basically, if a patient comes back to the hospital and say that I don't want you to be my data controller anymore, please remove all my data, the data controller needs to do this. A second reason for having this trace is that, you know, if for research purposes or for clinical purposes, you want to feed back some results to a specific patient, you obviously need to know who the physical person was. And for clinical purposes, this makes a lot of sense. Then maybe the processing is part of the diagnostic chain or the diagnostic workup. So you want to feed back the results. For research purposes, it can be for ethical reasons that we are acquiring data on a subject or someone that was enrolled in the study, and ethics approval suggests then that we should, you know, if there is a finding, maybe a secondary finding or something that's wrong with the patient, we need to feed this back. So it's an important to have this trace, at least initially in a short-term perspective. I will give a few examples of projects we are engaged in. So the first one is PancAIM. It's a pancreatic cancer repository, which is European. So basically 6 larger sites in Spain, Sweden, the UK, Holland, working together to build up a repository. And they focus obviously then on pancreatic cancer, and they store radiological images, pathology images, and genetics, so DNA, RNA sequencing. So in addition to having kind of the de-identification process, there's also processing. You also have to respect that you are aggregating data across multiple fields, which could make data more identifiable than others. And the way this project works, and how we work with such a large data repository to make it meaningful, is that we, as you saw previously, we have this data repository where each subject is an entry. Whenever there is new data coming, it is put under the right subject according to this hash key that you saw earlier. And for each project, for each repository or consortium, we can raise multiple projects. So in this one, the example is a first project, which is data upload. So we upload images, we upload more clinical data, we quality control this. So the input to this project is basically empty, but the feedback into the repository is data. For the second one, it's an AI project. So we define a cohort from our data repository. The input to the project is the cohort. We run quality control, we run an AI model, and we store the data or the results. So the feedback back is more data. A review project could be, again, quality control, a radiological assessment according to a structured reporting. For example, in Fredrik's field, it's the BI-RADS has been used quite extensively, and then we can store these results. A fourth project could be that Fredrik Strand wants to run a local project together with the technical school and they want to run on their infrastructure. So again, a cohort is defined, the data is downloaded, local AI processing is happening or training, and then upload of that data. So this way we create like a dynamic repository where you can actually work on the data real time. So let me just click on this link to give you an example what this looks like. So this is just an example, and this is the live pipeline now. So for each line we have a subject, and on the progress we can see how far we made to curate according to the pipeline that was defined in this project. You can see the first one is really an upload event. The second one is a quality control event, and further on. And if we step out from the running this pipeline, we can actually edit the pipeline. And when we go to the screen, we can see what this process looks like. So basically, it's the upload of data, quality control of data. It's a radiological review of reviewer 1 and reviewer 2. There's an AI segmentation step, and there's a simple review of the results as stated. And this can be kind of modified as you like. So another example where we are involved is EU Can Image, and for them, for this consortium of 20 partners, we are responsible for the image data annotation. And here we go a little bit more into the detail what annotation means. So basically, enhancing the data can be radiological assessments and gradings. At the EU Can Image, the plan is to do a large scale kind of bi-rads assessment. Then we can also go into images and review specific images, annotate data. So this is like a detection annotation where we use like a boundary box, which is a square just highlighting the pathology and then maybe labeling the pathology. And then it can also be that the annotation involves more segmentation of lesions. So basically saying this is the boundary of the pathology or the lesion we are detecting. So there are some different variants of actually annotating data. And this is the one example that I just show you on one screen. You have some kind of structured reporting for breast radiologists to fill out. On the other side, you have like the professional tool of actually reviewing the data and labeling it. And when we built the requirements for data annotation in imaging, we thought a lot about speed, since data becomes bigger and bigger. Efficiency really important, and I think this is a really good example that we made. So in this specific project, we're supposed to annotate 15,000 subjects, and if it takes 2 minutes to prepare the data to put it on the screen, it takes 2 minutes times 5 lesions to actually annotate. It will be 300 days of 10 hours of work to annotate this data, which is if not impossible, very, very difficult to achieve. If we can reduce this to 30 seconds of preparation, 10 seconds per lesion times 15,000, this becomes 33 days. If you split that up on a collaborative effort or a crowdsourced effort of maybe 10 people or 10 radiologists, then this becomes manageable. And we also thought that these tools, they're often developed by data scientists, which makes that they're great for, the annotation tools are great, but maybe the radiological review kind of falls behind. So we wanted to really merge these two together, to have professional radiology review together with data science tools. And then we come to storing annotations, how this is done. And there is still, I think, pretty big heterogeneity in the industry, trying to figure out a good way of storing labels. And there is one that is defined inside ICOM, which is the standard for imaging, which is called RT-struct. It's used in radiation therapy, which uses a lot of annotations for risk organs, etc. And I think a lot of people start to agree that this is a good standard. Yeah, and then for structured reporting or for radiology assessment, this is more like clinical data and needs to fit into common data models like the OMOP or the fire that the industry is suggesting right now. Okay, I think I pause here because I see I spoke a lot longer than I planned to.
Thank you, Anders. Fredrik, please go ahead. Do you have some questions for the Anders talk?
Well, questions I have. Well, one is just thinking about privacy. How do you think? How are the images like stored? Are they stored in? If there is someone is getting access to the images, can they then see the images, or are they encrypted somehow?
Yeah, so the way we define it is that the data controller that is sharing the data, they decide on the access control. So basically they can decide who will have access. And inside the research repository, we have a matrix of this access control. So you can basically say that a specific group of people, they can have viewing access to their own site's data, or they can have to all the sites in one project, or they could have the ability to modify data or curate data. So basically, we see it as you set up roles that you decide on, maybe in a specific project. You sign these roles to members, so it can be kind of dynamically done. Yeah, so that's very good. But I also wonder if there is like a security breach. You know, someone hacks the system. It's just the detail, but have you considered having images like themselves like stored in an encrypted form that is not useful for anything? Yeah, unless you have the encryption key. I mean, when we move data, we encrypt it like common practice. Yeah. When we store it, it's not encrypted. So basically, let's say we had a breach, and that is part of our risk analysis. Like someone steals a password or gets into the system and starts looking at the images, and then we start looking at what's the impact. So basically, they are de-identified data. It's a copy of the original. Which kind of from a breach severeness is a little bit less, but no, we don't use encryption for the actual. You don't need the key to see it. No. Yeah. I mean, in general, I think a lot of the tools that you have presented are tools that I would like to use in my research. Absolutely, it would be very helpful. But and I suppose I know that you have different agreements. I mean, all hospitals they don't come on board until someone is interested enough, and also there is a legal process and so on. I suppose. But so MedTechLabs is located in Stockholm, and how far have you come to make it possible for us to use it in Stockholm in general and
for our research in particular?
So I think that we try to lower the barriers as much as possible. So make it easy to take a decision to connect, and we support that process. If we speak about the healthcare system in Stockholm, we have had the Stockholm region do their risk assessment on the system, and it also triggered like an external security firm actually testing the system for in combination. So that has been done. We have Södersjukhuset connected. We have a few more, Danderyd and Ersta, I think, and there is a process ongoing with Karolinska University Hospital for Huddinge and Solna to connect to Collective Minds as well.
Overall, then, not just for a certain PACS, like for the, overall, also for, because breast radiology, we have a separate PACS and the radiology system.
Yeah.
That this will be overall, because I just think that it's regional. So it's both for Södersjukhuset, Sankt Göran sjukhus, Stockholm, Karolinska and so on. Okay.
So there's two answers to that question, I think. So first of all, it's like, who is the data controller? And I guess that would be the same for breast and for general, for example. So once that is established, that is okay. And then the actual integration is a very small process. It's like 30 minutes install. We are working with some vascular surgeons at Karolinska that is part of an Oxford project, and they are themselves data controller of some of their data, so they could so we can install directly into their lab, like but for the general one, I would say at the end of the summer.
Okay, I would like to open up for more questions from all of you that have listened to Anders' presentation and Fredrik's introduction. Please. Any reflections?
Mats Persson, maybe.
Yeah, please, Mats.
Yes, thank you, Anders, for the talk. I'm curious about the differences in the regulatory landscape between different jurisdictions, primarily between Europe and the US. So if you would expand this to the US, would you be able to use the same model for the data distribution, or would you have to, is the regulatory landscape so different that you would have to change something very significantly?
So from a technical perspective, not so much. They follow each other pretty nicely. So, and from a regulatory standpoint, they're quite different. So if we speak about patient privacy or data privacy, in Europe we have the GDPR, which maybe one of the best frameworks to protect patient privacy today. In the US, there is a framework called HIPAA, which is maybe a little bit more practical, setting up rules like how processing and data sharing should be done, and going more into the details. But I think conceptually they work pretty nicely together. And then there is some agreements between the US and Europe, where we store data. So if we speak about Europe, GDPR is very, very protective of storing the data or having the processing happen in Europe, maybe even more so than the US. But in US there are some of those regulations as well. So maybe to move into a larger scale in the US, there needs to be data storage happening in the US as well.
I think that, are you happy with that, Mats? Okay. Birgitta Janeroth, please, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you, Anders and Fredrik. It was very interesting to see how far we have gone. I had some questions on firstly, on the annotation tools you use, as you know, it's a lot of speak today about those federated data, and that you, instead of moving the images, you're instead moving your either annotation key or how to do the processing of the images. Are you developing the annotation tools yourselves, or can you implement from other companies what they have already done? And is that possible to move then instead of moving the images?
Great question on a very hot topic, Birgitta. Yes, so just broadly so everyone is aligned. So we kind of promote the central approach that we move the data to centrally. But there is a lot of talk about federated approaches, so we don't have to move them. What we have learned, and we're actually part of one of those projects as well. What we have learned is that from a legal standpoint, it's not so much easier to leave the data locally. Maybe from a confidence perspective, it's a little bit easier. Like people feel more confident if the data doesn't leave. But essentially, someone becomes a processor even in the local environment for that to happen. And then about the tools, we develop a subset of tools ourselves, but we're also extremely open to integrating other tools through APIs or even through what we call containers. So basically, we have container templates which we can provide to a group at Karolinska or KTH that they put their tools into this container and they can install it on the central repository. Why we think the central approach is better is that if we start using the federated one, you have a big challenge in training everyone, and it's much harder to trace back if there is differences, etc. So the quality control becomes much stricter in the central approach, and we can better monitor that one. And when we have had these conversations, many other industries like banking, the other regulated industries, they started with building first local clouds, then into federated, and then moved in the end when security became really a topic, they moved into the cloud. So we think that healthcare will have kind of the same same strategy. So we're a little bit betting on that as well, of course.
But it takes so big. I mean, you need so big repositories if you should. So that's just another question you can have. Do you have annotation tools for 3D images in volumes and so, or is it just 2D?
I could show you. I can send you a presentation on the annotation tools we have, but basically. The one for detection is a boundary box in 3D, and it can be drawn either on a 3D volume, and you see it in the MPR planes. And once you have detected a lesion, it will populate in 3 dimensions directly. Or you can even draw it on multiple 2D scans. So basically, rather than having the image volume as reference, you have the patient in the machine as your frame of reference. So basically, you can populate a 3D draw on multiple 2D series, which is very powerful, especially for lower abdomen cancer studies where you use still a lot of 2D imaging, especially in MRI.
Thanks. I also had a question for Fredrik, because I was about your rock curves there. Did you ever, was it the same type of machines used, the equipment for all breast radiology in your study there? Or did it come from different equipments? And did you ever do any test of if it's more dependent on the equipment than it is on the images per se?
Yeah, so this images in the study that I showed and that was published was from Hologic. I mean, equipment, the mammography equipment was Hologic only from Karolinska. And so that's what we studied. So, but then we have also, not published, but we have just also, we processed with the same AI images from Philips equipment. That we actually have more images on Philips, but not at that time, but now we have. And it doesn't show the same performance. So the performance on Philips equipment is a little bit, lower. So it definitely seems to be a difference between the equipment that was used for acquiring the image, at least for that algorithm. I mean, also I know they didn't train on a lot of Philips images, so that's probably part of the explanation. It could also be that Philips images are actually worse. I mean, we don't know for sure. It could be that it's just harder to see the cancer. That could also be a question. I mean, we don't know which is the correct answer, but we know that the AI performed a little bit worse when it came to cancer detection on those images.
Yeah, we're really in need of validating everything there. So thank you very much. Interesting.
Okay, thank you all for participating in this seminar, and it will be available on the MedTechLabs website within a month or so. So thank you very much. And thank you, Fredrik and Anders, for great talks.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thank everyone.
Thank you. Enjoy the game.